Okay, Assalamu alaikum. So I have been trying to get Saida for a very long time. I'm going to tell you why. Not only is she a scientist, but she has been doing her homeschooling for, I don't even know, I'm going to find out. But I know it's for a long time because when I interviewed her, she was just literally a newborn, I would say. She was, spreading her wings in her initiative. And it's been years since I couldn't even begin to tell you, but she's going to enlighten me. Saida, assalamu alaikum. You okay?
Walaikum salam. Hello, Shalina. It's been a long time. It's been a really long time.
It has, it has. So
Yeah.
you
And I
are
remember
someone that we needed to speak to. How long has it been?
it's going to be 10 years in August since I started Femtinos. So 10 years since I started working with the home education community. And I totaled up a couple of months ago that we've worked with 12,000 kids in that time frame. So
MashaAllah, that is
it's been a long
amazing.
time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think in that time you've grown and you've moved away from the UK, and I've been building the business, and I think we lost contact for a long time. So it's nice to be back in contact again.
Yeah, under different circumstances this time. So yeah, I kind of took off my radio presenting cap, and now I'm a teacher and a mum, of three, mashallah, since we last spoke. I guess there's two more additions to the family. And it's a situation, we've obviously, I'm in week 3 of lockdown now. I'm just going to explain quickly. The first week was actually a week school holiday. And then the following 2 weeks was something that were introduced from the Kuwait, where they were saying, okay, first of all, we're going to close schools for 2 weeks. That was their first step into lockdown. And then we were told that those 2 weeks were going to be extended. So, we're on week 3 now, and, it's had its own set of, what can I say, effects on me as a person, I think the family in terms of how we've been interacting with each other. But for me, I definitely wanted to reach out to someone like yourself to speak about homeschooling, because you've obviously interacted with many parents, and also from the scientist perspective, because mashallah, the other day you shared a very, informative video about coronavirus. It's something that I think needs clarity, because I think there are some people that are like, it's just a flu, so please, bring some light into this situation. First of all, let's talk about coronavirus. How serious is it?
I think it's pretty serious, and I think, especially in the UK, the government's not taking it seriously, and it's unfortunate that we're in a situation where we're kind of left to make these choices ourselves. And I was talking to someone earlier, and we were talking about, he was mentioning it was a Facebook conversation, and he was saying it's crazy how people are reacting in the UK because they're buying toilets, they're buying supplies, and they're not really thinking about anyone else. And I said to him, it's a bit like kids. If you have a room full of kids and you don't give them any direction, you don't give them any structure, they're going to run riot.
Yeah.
And this is what's happening with the adults at the moment. They're literally running riot because they don't know how to respond to this, and they want to feel like they're doing something. So I think it comes to leadership, and Kuwait and Morocco is another example, and I think Saudi as well. They're all locking down. And they're doing it, and they're providing that leadership. They're providing that kind of, this is what you guys got to do. Because when you're in a panic state, you can't think clearly. You need to be told what to do. You need to be given clear instructions. And I think you've got that in Kuwait. Moroccans have got that. They've locked down no international flights. And they've only got 26 confirmed cases.
What I want to do is, rather than focus on, because let's face it, I guess everyone agrees that UK's position on this hasn't been the greatest. So rather than, put them on a pedestal and be like, oh, this place is greater than the other, I want to be able to just be like, look, I'm in week 3 of lockdown, I've already had to learn from my mistakes, So in terms of us saying that, look, what is the situation with coronavirus? Let's give, this classroom, those that are choosing to watch this video, some clarity and some calmness and some direction. Let's do that in this video, inshallah.
I think there's so much unknown about it. So I spent about 5 or 6 hours researching this before I did my hour-long video. And there's so much conflicting information that you have to really go to the source and see where that information is coming from. And the problem is we don't know much about this. It's new. So we can look at historic cases like SARS and MERS and the common cold and pneumonia, because they're all the same family. So you can think of this as a family of birds. We have birds which are canaries and finches. They don't really bite that much. You've got budgies, they bite a bit harder. You've got parrots, you've got eagles, they hurt if they bite you. And this is kind of what we've got. Coronaviruses are a family of different viruses. And within that, we've got the common cold, we've got pneumonia, we've got SARS, and SARS and MERS were quite a high mortality rates, but they were better controlled. Right. So those cases were isolated, and then we didn't have this kind of spread. Now, we've not had this kind of spread before in a while. So you can compare it to the 1918 pandemic, where we had the Spanish flu, and that spread like fire, like how this is doing right now. So the problem is we don't know much about this from a science perspective. We know very little about this particular type of strain. So we can't predict. And anyone that is predicting is basing it on the very little knowledge that they know. So you might have seen some graphs floating about which shows where our country is kind of currently going. We're going in the same direction as Italy, and we don't know what that curve's going to look like afterwards.
But the World Health Organization, WHO, have stated it's a pandemic, so we know it's something that we have to take action on. And I think that's where the craziness comes from, where people are like, oh my God, we need toilet roll, oh my God, because their instinct is telling it's telling everyone, oh my God, we need to now do something. But like I said, what is it now, that you would advise that you do? Because I just want to quickly state that, Kuwait has actually stabilized in its figures. We got to, I think, 123 people that got it. And the recovery rate is now increased. There's been no deaths, mashallah, and, living in Kuwait and hearing those kind of things in comparison to other countries, I'm like, I feel really grateful to be here. And so I'm saying that for those people that watch the video and that are from the US, that are from the USA, because those are the people that, that I generally speak to, they're in the early stages of lockdown, and what advice can we give them in terms of, from a homeschooling perspective? Well, not homeschooling yet, let's not go there yet, but just from in terms of the precautions that they need to take, as a measure in terms of the lockdown.
So I think if you're not already doing this, the first thing is you need to minimize going out the house. Even the government, I think the government now is saying you need to stay at home as much as possible. But I made this decision early last week. So from my business perspective, I started moving everything online because I knew that this is the direction it was heading. So I think people need to start to seriously think now, what can I do that involves me not leaving the house? So that also means for work, that means the problem we have is that schools are still open. So my advice to parents is to really consider whether they want to send their kids to school. And I've been telling people to actually keep their kids at home.
So to my knowledge, now this was, we're talking over 10 years ago when I was looking at homeschooling. But to my knowledge in the UK, the requirements are that you write a letter withdrawing your child from the school and let them know. And you can say it's because of the pandemic, and basically say to the school if they wish to volunteer any academics, then they are willing to accept that. And then send a letter, like a photo of that letter to an email which you can get off the government website, the homeschooling department, and actually notify the homeschooling officer that you are educating your child otherwise, because that's the big word, isn't it, in homeschooling. So I'll put a link actually for where, if you're from Birmingham, UK, you can actually email someone. Am I missing anything?
No, I think that's right. But people might not necessarily want to homeschool. I think we're at a crisis point where they want to they want to keep their family safe, but not necessarily homeschool permanently, but as a precautionary measure. So there's been temporary Facebook groups set up at the moment, where parents are writing letters in to pull their kids out for a couple of weeks while this starts to die down. And we don't know how long it's going to take, though.
Yeah.
So they could be off for a while. So there's 2 Facebook groups that I've come across, and again, I'll give you the links and you can add them. They're both UK based. One has about 1,000 people in there. The other one's got about 1,500. So there's quite a few parents that are concerned. And the group is there to support parents to write letters to schools stating that they want to pull their kids out because of safety reasons. They don't want their extended families to get ill, or even if their kids have got autoimmune disorders and they don't want them to be exposed to the virus. So there might be more than one reason, and you might not necessarily want to home educate permanently. So they're doing this on a temporary measure, pulling their kids out for a few weeks, keeping them at home, and then educating them at home in that time. And a lot of schools, from what I've heard so far, are willing to provide packs and resources, because they're already starting to prepare that for when the government does close down the school. So I know a family today, I was speaking to one of my colleagues, she's pulled her son out, and he's going to be at home. I've spoken to a few families last night, they're pulling their kids out. And that's not to home educate on a permanent basis, but just under this crisis until it's over.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and that's what I'm saying, is that in my first 2 weeks, when I had actually off school, I did kind of take that position. I was kind of like, yeah, you know, just chill out, watch the movies and whatever. But you can only do that for so long. I think there does have to be a little bit of structure at home. So once that structure is there, the day goes quicker, and you know, the kids actually go to bed, and you know, they're not exhausted, but they're tired and they're ready to go to bed. And for your sanity, you need the kids to be at bed by a decent time.
No, I completely agree. I think it's great that even if you're keeping them at home, have some structure there. But I think the difference is the legal stance. So either are they legally still in school, or are they legally being home educated? Because there are 2 very different implications there. Because one is still the responsibility of the school, and you're still putting yourself at risk of being fined and potentially going to court, because it's an unauthorized absence in a lot of cases. The other one is you're completely leaving the school, you've lost your kid's place, so you can't actually go back there unless they've got a space again.
Right.
So there's 2 different things here. So the temporary measures are what people are mostly taking. A couple of them are actually pulling them out and home educating. But again, that has to be your own family's decision, because you might not be able to go back to the same school again.
Yeah. Gosh, I'm feeling stressful even thinking about that, because I know some parents have gone to such measures to get their children in particular schools. So okay, so we'll put the Facebook groups on there so that, you know, parents can work that out. And yeah. So in terms of let's say, you know, parents choose to send their children to school, you know, what are the different, you know, lengths we can go to in terms of protecting ourselves?
I think most schools now are taking precautions anyway. So they're washing their hands in between the lessons before they arrive. They're using hand gel. And I've heard lots of cases where kids are coming home with cracked hands because they've been washing them all day. So I think they are actually taking precautions. And then if your child is displaying any symptoms of being ill, to keep them off, because the symptoms in children are going to be different to how adults are experiencing the virus. So even if it's a simple cold, or a little temperature, or even a sore throat, that could be the start of the virus. And remember, they're probably carrying it before they're showing the symptoms. So don't even wait a few days. As soon as you know, just keep them off, for the safety of other kids as well and other families.
Yeah. And there's the fact that, you know, if children are going to school, because I'm thinking about, you know, my own mom, for example, you know, if children are going to school and they're bringing it home to the elderly, you know, it's so, you really just have to think about this, you know, really with a bird's eye view of your family, you know, what's happening in your household. So, okay, so, I mean, what can we do? You know, like I said, I think that the UK are in early stages of lockdown, and also the US. I'm hearing from friends that they're also in that position where they're having to make their own decisions. You know, what's the main thing that you got? You know, what was the response you got back from the 1 hour long video that you done on coronavirus? Because hopefully, I think that would be the benefit in what needs to go out there, because I think there's different levels of anxiety, right?
I think there's a difference between panicking and being informed. You can be informed and be taking rational decisions, and then there's a panic state where you're just completely not panicky and you're scared of everything and anything. Do what you can in your control. I think that's one thing that I can say. You can control when you leave your house. You can control what you allow inside your house. And if you're like, I know families that are disinfecting parcels when they're arriving and just wiping stuff and making sure that nothing's being transmitted in. So just be careful. Don't go to things that you don't need to go. So don't go to restaurants, don't go to cafes, and order stuff home. Like you were talking about in your live. I was just listening to your Facebook live, and you were saying order stuff home rather than going out and shopping. Because when you're shopping, you're in a crowded place. People are touching everything. So you're in a worse situation than if you're at home and ordering and the parcel's arriving home. And I'm a very, very visual person. So when I think about the virus, I'm like, people are touching. I can just see like little bits of red like everywhere. And you're like, where you can't control that, but you can control it in your house. So the only thing I can advise is stay at home as much as possible.
So, I mean, you know, you've talked about unpredictability. You know, once these 2 weeks pass, now here's the big question, okay? Because obviously I respect what Kuwait's doing, but there is a part of me that thinks, you know, how likely is it that we would have contained it to the point where it's not going to happen again? You know, how are we going to contain this? You know, once it's out there, I'm just a bit nervous that, you know what I mean, how it started is going to start again. It's just going to become a pandemic again. You know, that's my anxiety.
So, as far as I'm aware, Kuwait locked down on the 2nd of March. Is that correct?
As early as, yeah.
So now exactly on the 16th, you've had your 14-day incubation period. So anyone that had contracted the virus by that point will have been displaying the symptoms by now. Now, it depends on how those families were living. So if they were living in an extended family, there might still be cases where other people in that house are still going to be getting that virus. So I think over the next 14 days, you might still see an increase. But until that house is isolated, there's a chance that it could come back again. So it depends on whether those people in the houses are still leaving and touching stuff, and it's
I mean, like I said, Kuwait were like they closed the airports, you know, and anyone that had been to countries of risks, you know, honestly, I was like, whoa, you know, like they basically said to them, you have to come in for testing. I don't know if you've seen the videos where they basically had this massive hall, and you know, there was like 1 meter between each chair surrounding them, and it was spread out, and they had to go for testing. Every single person that had been to Egypt, that had been to Italy, you know, and that's how they did it. And then they were advising people whether you would have self-quarantine or you would actually go. They had hotels, they had you know, large areas on beaches. You know, they didn't mess around, and they made it very clear, the government. They were like, we value people more than we do money. We know that this is going to have consequences, but we value people, families, and, you know, and whatnot, and this is for your own good. Because there is this little point where you're like, you know, you're like a little kid. You're right, honestly. Good leadership they are like the parent and, you know, a community. Because even when I was on the beach, and I'm so grateful that morning I was just like, you know what, we're going to go to the beach. And I'd squeezed out 2.5 hours on the beach. And then the police turned up, and I was like, what? I didn't know about this. And they were basically like, no, that was the first day that they'd basically said, now no one can be out in public, you know, parks, in beaches and stuff like that. So, you know, and like I said, it's had its benefits, because as a family now, I think my spirituality has increased, you know, because obviously I've got more time on my hands. There's no rush, you know, the priorities that usually were there, they've diminished now, you know. I'm like, I haven't got no planning to do, you know, and I am still actually working with the kids that go to the school. So we use Class Dojo with our kids. So we send, you know, our children out as teachers, we send the children out daily plans, and they send photos back of them doing the plans, you know, and I'm earlier, so I've got it easy. So, you know, oh gosh. Anyway, I will put your link down, and I'm sure people will inundate you with questions and stuff. Your video Facebook Live is also still on your feed if people really want to go into detail. Because bless you, you really, mashallah, you really did some work on that. You really went into it.
I did. I spent ages doing it, and I think it's just people getting informed about the virus and how it spreads, how we can minimize it. And honestly, I think you guys are going to, if the government is taking it seriously, you probably are going to be in quarantine for about 4 to 6 weeks just to make sure it's not coming back. Because once that period is over, then you guys are sorted. You're fine. Yeah. But then what happens in terms of airports? How long are they going to remain closed? Because the rest of the world isn't sorted yet. The UK's predictions are that we're still going to have the virus in 2021, summer of 2021.
That is
we
really
don't know how long we're going to be suffering over here.
Yeah.
But I've got a lot of time on my hands as well. So what I'm going to be doing over the next couple of weeks is I'm going to be doing YouTube lives as well, but live on YouTube. And I'm just going to do 10-minute sessions on science, maths, and art. So people can kind of tune in and have a look at that as well.
Yeah, I do feel like we're going to have to discuss that. I think we've got enough time to just quickly squeeze in the second part that I wanted to speak to you about. And that was homeschooling. You know, you had a wealth of experience with the parents, with the children. You know, I'm obviously dealing with it. There's an anxiety that steps in from parents. I'm like, oh my God, homeschooling, where do I start? What do I do? Do you know, like, how do I structure my time? Like, help us. Well, you know, what's your opinion?
I think the first thing that you need to realize is it doesn't have to be like school. And you don't have to work through worksheets. You don't have to have a structure from 9 o'clock till 3:30. It doesn't have to be like that. Obviously have some structure because kids need that. They need to be able to know what they're going to be doing. Otherwise, what we were talking about earlier today, it's just riot. They're going to be running around going crazy. So there needs to be some structure. But it could be just a structured activity. Okay, we're going to make breakfast now. Let's have a look how we can make a healthy breakfast. Let's do a little search on how we can make a healthy breakfast. How do we make a smoothie? What could we put in there? What are the measurements? Let's do some measurements. That's all learning. And then you could look at maybe making dinner. Let's look at healthy eating. How can we make dinner using the ingredients we've got? How are we going to be measuring stuff? All of that is learning, and it doesn't have to be the same type of learning that you would expect in a school environment. Remember, teachers are limited to what they can do in a class environment because you're working 1 to 30. But in a home environment, when you're working 1 to 1 or up to 4 or 5 kids, you've got the ability to be able to have that tailored approach, which is unique to your family. So I think the first thing to do is not to stress about it, to be able to take a step back and go, right, what do I want my kids to learn? And it could be as simple as, let's learn how to cook together. Let's learn how to clean the house. Let's learn how to, and then what are we doing by cleaning the house? We're getting rid of viruses. Let's learn about viruses. Let's learn about what cleaning products we're using, what chemicals they've got in there. And all of this kind of stuff can kind of naturally form from just a question the kid asks, like, what's in that, or how does this work, or how does a washing machine work?
You know what, I'm glad you said that, because I think that's what's happened, you know, is that spending so much time with my kids is I've realized that those are the things that I needed to refine. So for example, when I have asked my daughter to go and do her work, you know, I realized that she struggled to have a good attention span. So I'm like, oh, you know what, you're really struggling. What can we do to motivate you? You know what? Let's put some quotes around you, you know. And from the moment that we're waking up, you know, I'm like, right, okay, let's look at hygiene. You know, have you brushed your teeth? Go and have a wash. You know, I've got the time to give them that attention. You know, I haven't got to be, you know, with the driver, like in 10 minutes time, get up, brush your teeth. Okay, let's go. You know, I'm like, okay, you know what? There's no rush. You know, today you can stay in your pajamas all day and you can just help me make the pancakes, you know. And, you know, and I think the one thing that I want to share is that the thing with homeschooling is, I think parents are overwhelmed in the beginning, but kids crave routine. And if you set the routine, my son's 3 years old, you know, and he's the one that's like, Mummy, what are we doing today? Because he realizes my structure. We're going to watch a video, and then afterwards, we're going to go and do something around that video. So if it was insects, then I don't know, we're going to go and color an insect or paint an insect, you know. And that's the way that I've been doing it. So I'm glad that you've talked about that, because there was like a little bit of a dialogue, I think, with the parents, where they're like, they won't sit down and they won't, you know. And I was like, well, number one, welcome to my world. This is a teacher payback. You send them to school, go child, okay, listen to teacher, and then they don't listen to us. Well, now, you know, they had to enter our world. You know, and then that's what I had to say to the parents. I was like, you know what? It's really about engaging them and then just injecting their love for, you know, being a scientist. And that's why I wanted to bring you in, you know, Saidi, was because for me, I think science starts very early, right?
It does. Kids are natural scientists. They will ask the questions. They will ask why the sky is blue. They'll ask, why do we see a rainbow? Why are there clouds? Why is the earth round? Like, they'll ask all these questions. And I think it's great to be able to have the time like you've got, because life is so fast that we don't get the chance to do that. And we miss on the opportunity to learn with our kids. So I think we can look at the positive sides of this. It's going to give you the chance to be able to really find out how your kids work, how their mind works, what kind of questions they want to ask, and how you go about engaging with the answers. We've got so much at our fingertips. Imagine if we didn't have the internet. Then I would say it's going to be a struggle.
Yeah.
But we have got so much information at our fingertips that you can just Google an answer. And then from that answer, you'll find another question and you'll keep going. And this is what I found when I did my research on the coronavirus. You research something, you find something else, you find something else. Yeah. And that's what it is with kids. They'll ask a question and it'll lead to something else, it'll lead to something else. And you'll be there forever and you'll be looking at stuff and the whole day will go. And it'll be great because you've learned something, they've learned something. So I think it's just about finding that inner scientist in your kids again. They're naturally like that, but sometimes we don't have the time to be able to answer that questions, and we tell them to, oh, we'll look it up later, or I'll tell you later. Oh, I don't know the answer to that question, and you never get around to doing it, and we kind of stop them asking those questions. But now you've got all the time in the world.
Explore the answer, and you know, and that's what I've really enjoyed doing. You know, I've got 2 different age groups that I'm working with at the moment, but you know, watching I've got to share this experiment that I did. I don't know if you've seen it, but I seen it from Little Geniuses nursery in Kuwait, and I seen a video. I was like, I've got to do that with my kid. And basically you get a bowl of water, you put some pepper in it, and then you stick your finger in it, and you have to look at the video, and then I get my son to look at his finger, and he's like, and at first, actually, he says, I'm not going to stick my finger in because it's dirty. I'm like, just trust me, son. So he sticks his finger in. I'm like, oh, look, the dirt's on your finger. And then we put the soap on. And then obviously when you put your finger in the water, the pepper just, you know, runs away. And I was like, see? The dirt doesn't want to be on your finger now because you use a soap. So, you know, and even staying in the house, I've had to say to my son, you know, I'm sorry, we can't go outside because of coronavirus. And, you know, people, they're going to be like, you know, and he goes, oh yeah, and then they're dead. I was like, yeah, to extremes, like, you know, but you know, the mind and the imagine, and that's why I said, parents shouldn't be afraid, I think, of you know, setting that routine, because the children, they crave the routine, and you know, they crave the attention. You know, I don't, you know, part of me, because there was one day when we found out that there might be maintenance in Kuwait and there was going to be no Wi-Fi, but it was a there was a misread message. But I'm not gonna lie, I was having a panic attack. I was like, oh my god, no Netflix, no phone, like, and then I just reflected on the way that I was reacting, and I was like, you know what, this is not good for me, you know, it's not healthy. Like, life before Wi-Fi, what did we do, you know? And so I injected a bit of that, and I started reading stories from Quran, you know, and stuff like that, and you know, reciting with them. And I do think, and that's what I think has come out of the lockdown, you know, is that learning how to spend time together with your family. And you know, I think it's another conversation. I don't want to drift off too much, but you know, social media is just created this narcissism, you know, where people are just so self-indulgent, you know. So okay, so last note, I'm so grateful for your time, but last note from you, what would you say?
Just stay safe, people, and stay positive, because I think if by being negative you're just going to make yourself even ill, and you don't want to be doing that when you're living in isolation or you're trying to isolate yourself. I'm on day 3 and I'm starting to struggle now, so I don't know how you've managed to do it, but I'm still working, but it's all online and it's not the same when you're not meeting people. But kudos to you to be able to do it to week 3. So I think the next few weeks are going to be really testing for me.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs. One does need that social interaction. I'm telling you, it's just, there is a part of you that's just like, oh my God, like, you know, the limitations, like you do want to just, you know, and I make sure basically I'll WhatsApp my family members, you know, or friends, so that I can have that breather. I think it's really important, you know, but thank you so much, and don't be a stranger, you know, and like I said, I'll put all the links, and please share the Facebook groups, and we will, you know, hopefully people have had enjoyed and got a lot of information out of this video. So thank you.
Bye.